Your brain is incredible, directing your thoughts and your memories, integrating new information, and helping you decide what's for lunch. Whether you're trying to get more done at work or, like me, you've forgotten where you put your keys again, many of us are looking for ways to focus longer and feel our best. Welcome to Hot Topics. I am your host and human performance coach, Molly Proct, and today we are talking about the brain-boosting effects of exercise. Our guest today is an exercise physiologist and registered dietitian with years of clinical and coaching experience. She is on a mission to buck the food rules and bring joy back to eating and movement. I am so excited to have Maia Kurnik here. Welcome, Maia.
Thanks, Molly. I've been looking forward to this.
I have been looking forward to it as well. Now, Maia, I know, obviously from personal experience and also the lack thereof exercise experience, that exercise makes me feel good. It's good for my body. It's good for my mind, etc. But I'm curious about what actually goes on in our brains when we exercise. Explain that to us a little bit.
Sure thing. Exercise is so good for every part of our mind, our body, our well-being. In the big picture, if we were able to somehow develop a drug that could do for our bodies everything that exercise can do for our bodies, it would probably be the most valuable pharmaceutical we've ever developed. Exercise does so much for us, but today is all about brain health. So let's start with the immediate effects of exercise on our brain health. So, Molly, imagine that you were to get up and start walking, maybe down the street. As you start walking, your body would start pumping more blood and oxygen to your brain. You might start breathing more deeply, and we know that that deep breathing can have a calming, relaxing effect. And you start to release lots of feel-good chemicals. You kind of bathe your brain in those feel-good chemicals as you're walking down the street, including dopamine and endorphins. With all of those things going on, even a few minutes of movement can have a really substantial effect on your mood. You might feel a lot better after that walk. Let's say you finish your walk and you come back and you sit back down at your desk. Immediately after exercise, we see that people are better at making decisions and our short-term memory improves. And those benefits can last up to several hours after exercise, which is really cool. And then maybe it's later this evening. You've gone for your walk, you've come back, you've finished your day, now you're going to bed. You're probably going to sleep better tonight because exercise can help manage stress and improve your sleep quality. And that's especially if you get up and you go outside in the sunlight to do your exercise. With all of these benefits, during, immediately after, and then based on your sleep, you can use movement as a mood and focus booster during your day. I know that there have been times where I have just been in a funk, right? You're having a bad day, or maybe I'm in a mood with my partner. Maybe somebody can relate. I know that going on a walk or getting up and doing a little bit of activity, getting away from my desk, is going to help me refocus, feel better, and be able to finish out my day in a much better way.
Maia, I just think it's so valuable just to hear those simple impacts that just a very quick walk can have, because I think so much of the time we have this lens of exercise equals weight loss, right? Or exercise equals like long-term goal completion. I got to do this for, a month or 2 or 3 months in order to see the results. And what you just pointed out there is these results that are noticeable after minutes later in your day, and like looking at how this affects other areas of your life aside from the physical effects that exercise can have. So I thank you for bringing that forward. And I know for me, I typically sometimes can look at exercise in one lane of maybe a goal that I want to achieve in my life. And I don't necessarily correlate it to my sleep or my mood or my breath, right? Even just kind of like my overall well-being for the day. And so you mentioned these long-term brain effects from exercise. So you kind of went through how it affects you in the immediate day, but I'm curious about the long-term. How far into the future do these benefits of exercise actually last?
Yeah, so Molly, you said it, that minutes matter when it comes to exercise. But the exercise that you do this week can actually help your whole body, including your brain, age better. So now we're going to zoom way out. We're going to talk about decades in the future. And so exercise, if you're doing it regularly, that means better memory as you age and also better mental health. So let's start with how exercise impacts kind of our long-term memory and learning. As adults, our ability to learn and remember is important really across our lifespan. We know that kiddos who are active tend to do better in school. As adults, being able to learn new things quickly and having a really good memory helps us do well at work, it helps us take care of our families, and helps us to enrich our lives. I'm sure that a lot of our listeners are here today because they enjoy learning new things and it brings joy to their lives. And I know that I'm not the only one who is starting to see my parents or grandparents
Yeah.
struggle with Alzheimer's or dementia later in their life. And we know that from newer research that the disease process for Alzheimer's disease or dementia actually starts earlier than we once thought. It starts in our 50s and 60s.
Oh, wow.
And since exercise is part of what can help prevent Alzheimer's and dementia, being active now for most of our listeners can go a long ways towards preventing Alzheimer's disease later in life.
Wow. I'm interested to hear more about the impact on memory specifically. I know I deal with memory lapse sometimes and I just chalk it up to being overwhelmed. Some of our listeners that are older, maybe, other people are really relating to that element of Alzheimer's or dementia. This element of exercise and its impact on memory. I'm curious to know more about that.
Sure. As adults, we use our long term memory a lot. And let's talk about what long term memory means. It means improved verbal fluency, and that's my ability to reach way into the back of my brain and pull out the exact word or memory or idea that I need in that moment. And it also means our ability to plan and problem solve. So if I were to hop in my car and drive to the
Mhm.
grocery store, right, navigate my way there through traffic, and maybe it's raining here in Seattle, navigate my way through the grocery store, remember all the things on my list because maybe I forgot my list at home, get home, and then plan all my meals for that week. That takes a lot of verbal fluency, ability to plan, ability to problem solve, right? So we need all of those things. We know that exercise, along with a healthy diet, really good sleep habits, and stress management habits, may help prevent dementia and Alzheimer's disease and help us hang on to all of those memory skills that we need long into late adulthood. How does exercise do that? We know that exercise boosts blood flow and oxygen to your brain. We already talked about that. We know that exercise kind of bathes your brain in those feel good chemicals. And there's one more thing: exercise also bathes your brain in a chemical called brain derived neurotropic factor. And
Mm.
that compound helps to build new brain cells, right? Create brand new baby brain cells, and also creates a really sweet nursery environment for them to live in and grow and start to connect. So we're making brand new brain cells. They're in a really happy environment to do brain cell things. And that means better connections between those brain cells, which means better memory, and better connections between the two halves or hemispheres of your brain, and so much more than we have time to get to today. But that's kind of the gist of it.
Yeah.
So if you're exercising regularly on most days of the week, let's say, those benefits last a really long time. We know that older adults who are active have better memory and better cognitive functioning, right? They're better able to get in their car, go to the grocery store without losing their way, without losing their keys, which means holding on to your independence a lot longer. When I first started my career, I worked in a skilled nursing community, and we would have residents who would come in. They'd be well over 100 years old, and I swear they had a better memory than I did. They were still able to learn new technology. They were connecting their iPads to the Wi-Fi, right? It was amazing. And when I would talk to these residents, the one thing they had in common was that they were all really active over the course of their lifetime. Now, I know there's people who are listening who are saying, like, gosh, like, did I miss the boat? I'm not that active.
Hmm.
No, it is never too late to start. It's never too late to start being active. What we know from research, again, is that going from doing absolutely nothing to something, even a few minutes a day, means that you can start to reap the benefits of exercise for memory and your physical well being.
That came up for me, Maya, was when is it too late? You mentioned that the effects of Alzheimer's or dementia is actually starting a lot earlier than we initially thought. And that's not something that I think about every day, right? Where I'm sitting in my career, and obviously most of us are working from home, we're pretty sedentary. There's very few reasons to leave my house anymore. And just noticing that I'm not looking down the road and how long I'll be able to keep driving or keep living independently. And it just makes me think about it a little differently. I know I have a 96-year-old grandfather, and he still drives completely independently. He lives independently. He still splits wood for his fireplace. He can do absolutely
My
everything
goodness.
that my 70-year-old father can do. And on the other side of the family, I have a 68-year-old parent, and they are more sedentary and dependent than the 96-year-old grandfather. And it is absolutely a result of activity, not hard exercise, but just movement. I think it's important to call out. So, thinking about starting wherever you are, for our listeners out there, regardless if you are already active or maybe if this is allowing you to bring awareness to maybe the lack of activity, where can we start, Maia, in terms of starting to reap the benefits of the exercise on the brain?
Something to remember, Molly, is that now is absolutely the time to start. It doesn't matter how you start or where you're starting
Mm.
from, now is the time. And there's another reason to make exercise a priority right now. I can't talk about exercise without also talking about our mental well being. May was Mental Health Awareness Month, and it's probably not a surprise to anyone that stress, anxiety, and depression are at all time highs among adults in our country right now. Let's take stress as an example. Stress and other mental health struggles get in the way of how I learn and how we accomplish our goals every day. And it also impacts how I think about myself and how I show up, maybe at work, maybe in my relationship with my partner, or as a friend or a parent. So here's where exercise and our mental health can intersect. Exercise helps you better manage your stress. If you think, you wake up in the morning and maybe there's already some stuff going on and you're a little stressed, and then over the course of the day, you kind of fill your stress tank and the pressure
Mm.
builds up all day long. Exercise is like a release valve for your body's stress hormones. So you go out for a walk and
Mm. Like the Instapot.
right? Like the Instapot. Yes. That's a perfect example. So, exercise releases all of those stress hormones, which is part of why it's a mood booster, right? We talked
Mm.
about it at the beginning. Those feelings of overwhelm that you mentioned earlier, exercise supports those sometimes. So, exercise also reduces anxiety and depressive symptoms in the short term and can help prevent future episodes. And exercise isn't all about avoiding uncomfortable emotions or feelings. We can
Mm.
also boost our mental health just like we can boost our physical health. And exercise gives your mental health somewhat of an edge. We know from research that people who are more active report greater confidence and self efficacy, which at first pass might not seem like much, but think of what you could accomplish if you felt more confident in your abilities every day. What would you be able to do differently, right? How cool would that be? Exercise also helps promote other healthy habits. If we are exercising, we mentioned we might sleep better, we might also eat better, we might go on a walk with a friend, so now we're connecting socially. And all of those habits, eating well, moving well, sleeping well, connecting well, help provide a safety net if or when our mental health does suffer over a lifetime.
Mm. I think all of us can agree a little bit of movement can definitely shift an outlook, shift a bad mood, shift a poor day. For me, I'm sitting here and I'm like, okay, I need to get back on my treadmill and I need to get my gym membership back and I need to go lift the weights. And, this kind of these big goals around movement and exercise, kind of like I talked about earlier, because a lot of us associate exercise with kind of one area of life. And so, based on the research that you've noticed, how much exercise, what kind of exercise? I think it's important that we look at what does movement boil down to for most of us in order to have these benefits? Because I'm assuming it's not hours in the gym or high intensity type output to get started. So where can we actually put some practice in like today?
Yes. Molly, I'm so glad you said that because you're exactly right. It doesn't take you going and spending hours in the gym and being miserable to get these benefits from exercise. And there's no time like the present. So,
Right.
for our listeners, we've got a few minutes left in this podcast. If you can, I encourage you to get up and just move for a few minutes, right? Bust a dance move, go on a walk, see how you feel at the end. Ultimately, most of us should be doing about 150 minutes of moderate intensity exercise each week. So at a moderate intensity, you could still talk, but you would be breathing too hard to sing. We call that the talk test. Most adults aren't there yet. Most of us aren't doing the 150 minutes of moderate intensity exercise each week. There's still good news. That good news is that the benefits aren't all or nothing. You don't have to do all 150 minutes before you start seeing some of the benefits on physical and mental health. We said even a few minutes of movement can boost your mood, and you can start improving your sleep in as little as 10 minutes of vigorous activity every day. It's bite-sized amounts of exercise. So breaking down those 150 minutes into those bite-sized pieces is important because, Molly, if you went out and you said, I'm going to run a half marathon on my treadmill, you might do that today, but you wouldn't do anything for the rest of the week, right?
I don't think I
starting
could do
small
anything
is
for the rest of the week.
Exactly, right? How many of us have gone out, done way too much, and been like, oh, exercise is the worst, and then we don't want to exercise anymore, right? I've done that. So to avoid that, to help break down the 150 minutes into something more manageable, something that you can do day after day, I'm going to share 3 tips before we go. First, we already alluded to it, start small. If you can't do 30 minutes today, fine. Can you do 10? Can you do 5 minutes of movement now and 5 minutes later today? Molly, I've started coaching folks who start with 2 or 3 minutes of movement in their day, and now they're walking 20 to 30 minutes every day like clockwork. It's become part of their usual routine, but they had to start small. It's those minutes that matter. Second tip is to use habit pairing. Habit pairing is where you use habits that are already part of your routine. They're really strong in your day as cues to do exercise habits. So every morning I wake up and I turn on my coffee maker. That is always going to be part of my routine, no ifs, ands, or buts. Habit pairing might look like when I get up in the morning and turn on my coffee maker, I'm also going to do a couple of push-ups against the kitchen counter. Or maybe I'm going to do a lap up and down the stairs while I'm waiting for my coffee to brew. Now I've added a couple of minutes of movement to my morning, and it becomes a stronger habit because it's tied to my love of coffee. And the third tip is to mix it up. So we should try to do some movement on most or all days of the week, but also try new things. Find exercises that feel good in your body. It'll keep things fresh and interesting, and it'll challenge your brain to learn new movement patterns. So start small, use habit pairing, and be sure to mix it up.
Thank you for sharing your experience with me today, Maia, and all of the research that you brought forward. I think this was absolutely impactful to notice the simple element of movement and the big impact it can have on our entire bodies. I'm looking forward to getting out and getting some movement in after we wrap this up. And for our listeners, there are some great resources from Enduro and from Move Your Way that I will be sharing in the show notes. Thank you for joining me for this hot topic. Until next time, be well.